that was nice. As Dick says, it's almost enough to make you want to run for office.
Almost. Well, we're delighted to be back here tonight. I've had the opportunity to visit the Nixon Library and Museum on a number of occasions. Served in the Nixon administration during the first term, and so I'm always pleased to come back and visit this part of the world and be reminded of a very important time in our history. I thought the president did a superb job, and I was happy to be a part of his administration. We're here tonight. I probably should explain at the outset why we're here together. The fact is, I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, and Lynne was born in Casper, Wyoming. And in 1954, when I was 13 years old, about to go into the 8th grade, my dad moved the family to Casper, Wyoming. He had a choice between Montana or Wyoming. He picked Wyoming. And it was a good thing because Lynne and I grew up together. I first took her out when she was 16 years old. We'll celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary come August. But if Dad had picked Montana instead of Wyoming, of course, I would never have married Lynne. She would have married somebody else. And as she said the other night, then he would have been vice president of the United States.
I don't recall that was one of the jokes you were supposed to tell.
I'm a freelancer now that I'm unchained. We're here tonight to talk specifically about a magnificent book that Lynne has written about James Madison. It's gotten some great reviews, and we're on the book circuit, so to speak, and I've been to the Nixon events here before, sponsored by the Nixon Library, when I had other books to write, to publish. And now we wanted to have an opportunity, obviously, for Lynne to present hers. It's as I say, it's a superb book about our nation's fourth president, and the plan is that I will ask her questions and she'll respond, and then at the end of that period of time, we'll open it up and take some questions from the audience as well, too. So with that, let me begin by asking why Madison? What made you decide James Madison needed another biography?
Well, before you get there, I want to say that I'm so grateful to Dick for joining me on this book tour, and I started referring to him as my arm candy.
Okay.
Well, I've known I was interested in Madison for a very long time. I had the privilege of serving on the Bicentennial Commission for the Constitution in 1987, and it was then I first began to understand how magnificent Madison's accomplishments were, and yet how little recognized he was in terms of what he had accomplished in his political life. It wasn't until 5 years ago that I became serious about writing the book, and it has been a labor of love. And I only hope that you'll enjoy the book as much as I enjoyed writing it. He was the architect of the Constitution, the architect of the Bill of Rights. He was crucial to the establishment of the first government under the Constitution. He was president during the first war under the Constitution. And he performed, if not magnificently, in all those jobs, at least very well. At the end of his presidency, John Adams, who was kind of a sour figure and not given to making compliments easily, John Adams wrote that James Madison's administration had covered itself in more glory than any of his predecessors, which is a great compliment because his predecessors were Washington, Jefferson, and Adams himself. So I do think he's been underappreciated, and it's been really so much fun. I mean, I know 5 years of labor doesn't sound like fun, but discovering things, being able to put it into a form that I hope would reach a wide audience, and as the book is called, Reconsidering James Madison's Life.
Which was the most important contribution he made out of it? You cite the contributions were enormous, obviously, but if you had to pick just one, what would it be?
Well, it would have to be the Constitution. I think he was a genius. And the reason is the kind of genius he had is that he was able to break through conventional thinking. When everybody else was thinking one way, Madison didn't necessarily accept it. He would think of other possibilities, and he did that in the case of the Constitution, in the case of establishing a great republic, which is what we are. The conventional wisdom was that you couldn't have a great republic, a great republic where people voted for representatives for themselves, representative government, that it would be too loose over a long and vast extent of land, and it would fall apart unless you had monarchical power, a king, a monarch at the center. Well, Madison just thought that was not true. He thought that, in fact, the danger in a republic is that one faction will dominate and oppress everyone else. And Madison's genius was to see that if you had many factions, as there would be in a large republic, then no single one was likely to be able to become oppressive. And that was the rationale for the Constitution that was produced in Philadelphia. It was his genius to see through what everyone else believed time and again, and to transform the world by doing it.
You talk about his relationship with the other founders, George Washington, for example.
We think sometimes of the founders as sort of sitting around having a polite conversation and all of them having the greater good in mind at all times. It's much more interesting to realize them as they were, which was people who firmly believed in their point of view and were willing to fight to see it succeed. In the beginning, Madison was Washington's chief lieutenant. When the first government under the Constitution began, now this will be familiar to any of you in politics, Washington had an aide write his inaugural address, and the aide produced a 72-page disaster. So Washington wrote to Madison and asked him, please come to Mount Vernon and help. And so Madison did, and he wrote Washington's inaugural address. Did a very good job of it. After Washington delivered the address, Madison, who was the leader of the Congress, wrote the Congress's response to to Washington. Got it. Thank you. You laughed, though I got it wrong. He wrote the Congress's response to the inaugural address. And Washington, by this time, thought Madison was so good at this kind of thing, he asked him, Madison, to write Washington's reply back to the Congress. It's hard to imagine how his voice was echoing off every wall. I'm not sure there's been another time in history when one man has been so influential at the beginning of administration, the way Madison was in the beginning with Washington.
But if you talk about the Constitutional Convention, obviously there were battles over various provisions in the Constitution. We ended up with Article 1, or Section Article 1, 2, and 3, and it took a long time, many, many hours and days of work to put it all together. But can you cite sort of the specific compromise, the most important provision that they were argued about, then ultimately were able to resolve?
Well, it was the thing we all learn in history books about the big states and the small states. And of course, the big states wanted states to be represented proportionally according to their population. The small states wanted the states to be represented as states. And we all know the compromise. They got represented as states in the Senate and proportionally in the House. Madison was appalled at that. He really thought there should be proportional representation across the board. He had gone into the Constitutional Convention thinking that the great threat to the Republic were the states. He called them the evil states.